Hello out there, and in front of you today is a interesting new model that we're going to be talking about, and this is called the Ingress, and it is from Nitch Designs, and I believe it's the first model that they have put out. And this was sent to the Apex Pass Around group in advance of this knife being announced and released on Kickstarter, and that's going to be happening on June 17th. So I will link to the Nitch Designs website down below, give you the opportunity, jump over there, get on that mailing list and get some more information if as you watch this video you find this knife to be as interesting and compelling as I do. All right, but today we're just going to go through it. We're going to go through some of the details and talk about why this knife really might speak to a lot of different people for a number of different reasons, because you know, a lot of the people who like the nicer stuff with like the great action and the high quality materials, they're going to like that maybe for collection purposes, but there are some design implements in here that really lend themselves to this knife being a great one to use. So we're going to go through all that good stuff, and let's just get started with some size comparisons. All right, the first thing that I'm going to bring out is the PM2. You can take a look at that. What we have with the Ingress is a cutting edge that's right around exactly 3 inches, just a little bit shy actually. So a little bit shorter than the PM2, but you can see already with the PM2 versus the Ingress a distinct difference in the way that the handle design and those mechanics there is really set up. And so that's really going to play a part in the way that the knife functions and some of the things that you can do with it. We also have, let's see, well, sort of a pretty similar comparison to the Paramilitary 2, but here's the 943. The best comparison though that I had, and the one that we're going to stick with a couple times throughout this video, is the Super Freak. Sure, it's not the same in terms of length or materials or anything like that really, but it's just something that I was thinking a lot about just because the weight is pretty similar. So take a look. We have some thick titanium slabs here, but they're not chunky on the Ingress, and there's so much precision machining on this that it really makes the weight very agreeable. For those of you who've handled a Freak or a Super Freak, you probably know that it is a pretty darn light knife for the size. So let's take a look here, get an understanding of that. 4.31 ounces on the Super Freak. The Ingress, 4.41 ounces. All right, so 4.41 ounces on this, and you can see just dimensionally that we have like a much taller knife and a much taller blade as well. So, you know, even though there are differences in some of these dimensions, I think it sort of equals out because the Ingress feels super light. One thing about the Ingress that they've done here to cut that weight, which is pretty cool, one of the features is these vents in the tang, which cut a little bit of the weight. And they were cool enough to send a previous prototype that didn't have this, right? And this one weighs almost half an ounce more than the one that they're going with. So a lot of time, a lot of effort has gone into sort of refining this design and making it as agreeable as possible, which is very cool. Now, as we continue to talk about the blade, we do have a pretty darn sterile blade. There's almost nothing on it at all. The only place where you'll see any markings is once you disengage the locking mechanism. I believe this right here is the production date. I'm not 100% sure. This says P44, so maybe that means April 4th. And then on the other side, we have the steel, CPM 20 CV. So we have 20 CV steel on this, which is definitely a good thing. I'm a big fan of the steel. And the blade shape, Wharncliffe, you know, and it is a, a distinct Wharncliffe. It actually looks sort of like a mountain, you know, just in the way that the blade overall is shaped. It takes a little getting used to. It was one when I first looked at it, I was like, that's a little bit of an odd one. And honestly, the reason why I signed up onto this list was because I remembered, and I can't remember the name of it, but I remembered an old artisan design that we had checked out a year or two ago that was a Wharncliffe, and it was super bulky and just weird, and I remember liking it more than I expected, and I said, all right, I'll give this one a chance too. And the thing that's very cool about this is just how this grind is done and how thin it is and how it's really made for, you know, being able to be a good cutting tool and a good user knife. So on the website, this is listed as being .015 behind the edge. I don't know details about that. I'm not 100% sure if that's super good or super bad. I'm assuming that it's pretty darn thin because this knife is pretty darn thin. I mean, you can see the stock and you can see where the grind line starts, and it comes down pretty, pretty distinctly thin. So yeah, it has that really great characteristic to it. And honestly, the more and more that I get a look at the blade and I get accustomed to it, the more that I enjoy it. So aesthetically, this knife is really starting to to grow on me. As we move on back, we have the opening hole, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. What is this, like a pentagon? A pentagonal opening hole, but it also sort of matches the lines and the shape of the blade itself. So that's pretty cool. And then we don't have any jimping, but we do have this distinct thumb ramp here. So let's get into the ergos now and dig deeper into that a little bit. So we do have a home spot, right? So this is what, ideally the knife is going to look like in hand, right? With just the way that it's designed and the way that it sort of says, like, here's where you should go. That said, when you're cutting with the knife, you're going to adjust any way that you need to. You're going to get the knife in hand in whatever works for you. So while, a little bit I was concerned with this pointy aspect right here, like sort of digging into the thumb, it's not really going to be an issue because as you cut, you're just going to adjust and find the comfortable spot for yourself. And, in the very light cutting that I've done with this, which everything worked perfectly, I didn't have any issues with that at all. But I prefer jimping. You guys know the answer is yes, but I also very much enjoy when people are able to sort of design around that and not necessarily have to do that and still make a knife that's comfortable. The other thing ergonomically, as we continue to move on back, that's very, very good is just the level of machining on this handle, inside and out. We talked about weight relief earlier. Let's see if we can get inside there and take a look at it and give you an understanding. Maybe you can see, maybe at that angle you can see just the depth of all of the machining on the interior of the frame. Very cool. Very, very cool. All right. But then we also have this machining on both sides. It's done very well, and it's really, really an ergonomic aid more than anything, I think. Yes, it's going to cut weight, sure, but ergonomically, all of these spots for a righty, they're excellent. And I'm left-handed, and what they actually do for me is, like, you can actually feel them in your palm. You can actually get an understanding of where you are, and yeah, it feels good. It feels good lefty too, so a good benefit either way. And aesthetically, I think they look pretty cool as well. Over here on this side, it sort of looks like the Windows logo or the New England Patriots logo shape, but it's still cutting a little bit of weight, so no harm there. Other stuff with ergos is that we do have, instead of, you can see, like a sharpening choil on the previous generation, here it's completely open. So you could, for some detail task, slide up. Obviously, you could risk sliding all the way up and cutting yourself. There's not really a guard there, so, user beware, but it's possible, and it's capable, and certainly comfortable. All right? So that is basically everything that I have with the ergonomics. Now, continuing to move on back, we do have a one-position pocket clip. Sort of resembles the old school kind of Benchmade clips, the 3 screws. It's a good clip, it's a pretty darn good clip. We do have a lanyard hole, and it's not obtrusive at all. So again, if we're doing lanyard holes, that's exactly the way that I want to see it. Minimalist kind of construction, not a lot of screws. So that's pretty much a good thing too. And I want to take a minute now and go through one of the most important and neatest design features on this knife. We're going to get to the action and the lockup in just a minute, but yeah, I do want to talk about when you're using this knife, what the shape of the handle and how your hand is going to be located really makes a difference in the way that you use the knife. And what you can see here is just when I'm holding this knife in hand, how low the cutting edge is compared to my finger. So you have what is almost a negative blade angle, meaning that the edge is below your fingers. And what that does for you is it allows you to get a certain amount of leverage when you're cutting on a flat surface that you usually just can't get using a different type of knife. So taking a look at this with this Wharncliffe blade, right, I can almost get the entire cutting edge on this flat surface of this board here while I'm holding the knife in a position to cut with. And so when you're thinking about food prep, that's an excellent thing. Using a cutting board, you'll be able to utilize almost the entire blade instead of just, a portion of it, which is what happens with most pocket knives. So just for comparison, I'm going to bring this to the side and bring in the Super Freak. Everybody knows the Super Freak is one of the best bench mains that's been put out in a good long while. It's one of my favorites. I love this knife, so I'm not knocking this knife at all, but it just has some qualities that don't make it the best thing for, the kind of tasks that you can use the Ingress for. And for example, I mean, this is a super comfortable grip, right? But if you're using a flat surface, look at the amount of blade that I can get onto this flat surface with my hand around around the frame. You just can't use all of it. So you have to cut differently, you utilize it differently. It's just not all being utilized the way that you can utilize the Ingress. So you have that big benefit, and so one of the things that first jumped out at me was food prep with this, not only because of that, it sort of reminds me of a chef knife. Sure, maybe not as long as a chef's knife would be, but you certainly have the thinness behind the edge that a chef's knife would have. So you're going to have just a good sort of jack of all trades kind of design here, where not only with food prep, but just cutting, this is going to sort of surprise you a little bit in the way that it's able to perform, just because of like the physical and geometric qualities of this knife that, might just go unappreciated at first look when you're thinking about, CPM 20CV, titanium frame lock, buttery smooth, that sort of stuff. You're not really thinking about like how great this is going to be to use. So yeah, definitely a great benefit there. Let's move into action and lockup. And this knife, I believe, was manufactured by We, and that would be no surprise because it is super, super smooth. What I found opening it is that for me, the spider flick is the easiest way. Just because I think the width of the knife here and the size of my hands, just like flicking it with my thumb like this isn't always the easiest. I can get it open most of the time, but I'm also left-handed, so it's easier the other way. But the action closing it is just pretty ridiculous. So yeah, you definitely have that fidget factor. You definitely have that level of quality in the internals that make it just a lot of fun. So the Detent is sort of pretty much as perfect as I could really ask for. So maybe it could be slightly stronger, but it's to the point where, once you break it, it really does want to fly out, and it also isn't going to shake out. So you've definitely got like the best of both worlds there. The lockup is very, very solid. So excellent work there. Very, very impressed with just that aspect of it. And honestly, guys, this is one of those things that I think will be a big draw for the people who like to collect and just really value that kind of, high-end mentality with the action and the fidget factor that you get on a lot of those like high-quality Wiis. All right, so overall, guys, what we have is a unique design, right? But it's a unique design that I think the more and more that I look at it and the more that I get an understanding of it, it calls to me. It definitely does. I would love to have one of these for myself. It just seems like it's a knife that might appeal to a bunch of people. And I know looking at it that there's going to be a lot of people that are just like, no, not for me. It's a little bit too odd, a little bit too outside the box. And while I understand that, I do think that there is the appeal to the person who likes to collect and likes to have pretty nice things. But more than that, I hope that this is a knife that ends up in people's hands for use. And the price point of it sort of allows for that as well, seeing that these are sub $200. When I found out that these were sub $200, I was pretty darn excited because I realized that the accessibility here was going to be very good. This satin version I think is $195, and then the Bead Blast Stonewash version is going to be $190. And so what you have is a knife that maybe for this level of quality, on, let's say, any other kind of maker, you might be paying more like $250, I'd say. And certainly if this was a Benchmade or a Spyderco with these materials, this price point would not be happening. So I think that there's a lot of value here, and I really hope that this ends up in the hands of people who want to use it, because I think that they will be super impressed by it, and they'll have a knife that they can actually rely on and have a lot of fun with, because this is a knife that cutting with is going to be just a lot of fun. And so while it would be really neat to see this sale become a success for Nitch Designs, just for people who are collecting it and putting it in a drawer, I really hope that's not the case. I really hope people utilize this a little bit more than that, because yeah, it has a ton of benefits in that regard. All right, guys. Again, I will link down below to the information for Nitch Designs. June 17th is that Kickstarter go live date, so check them out if you are interested. Thanks again to them for sending this one and that other prototype for the pass round. I really appreciate the opportunity at the early look. Any other questions, comments, complaints, suggestions, let me know down below. I'll talk with you soon, guys. Have a great day.